Right. Good day, students. Welcome to lesson number three. Lesson number three is going to be about earthquakes. I'm sure by now you've seen how the connection that we have between the structure of the earth, volcanoes, and now we're going to be talking about earthquakes. So basically, what you need to know what earthquakes are. So basically, earthquakes is sudden movement of our earth, and then the reason why there is, basic those sudden movements of the earth is because of we talked about earlier on about the structure of the earth. I talked about convection currents in the mantle and the outer core, and then we talked about tectonic plates. So due to the fact that there is convection currents in the within the inner part of the earth, that causes movement of the plates. When those plates move away from each other or even towards each other, that is convergence plates or diverging movements, then that can cause earthquake. So basically, before we go on to the definition or like what causes earthquakes, we're gonna look at the previous earthquakes that happened in this world. The first one is going to be about Kobe 1995. So on the 17th of January 1995, an earthquake measuring about 7.2 on the Richter scale struck the Kobe region of the south central Japan. The ground shook for only 20 seconds, but in that short time, over 5,000 people died and over 300,000 people became homeless. Because why? Uh, the the movement of the earth was too much. It caused destruction of homes, right? And the damage was worth an estimated about 560 billion was caused to roads, houses, factories, infrastructure. Right. Another case study that we're gonna look about earthquakes is in Japan, 2011. On the 11th of March, an earthquake measuring about 8.9 hit of the northeast coast of Japan. The quake was the largest recorded in history and the biggest to hit Japan. It triggered a 10-meter tsunami that battered Japan's coast, killing thousands and sweeping away homes, cars, buildings, and ships. There was a loss of more than 27,000 lives and thousands of people missing. So what made this quake even worse was damage, nuclear reactors which caused highly radioactive water to seep into the Pacific Ocean. So by far now, you can see that earthquakes can cause massive destruction to properties and to loss of lives, right? And then the destruction caused by earthquakes is very expensive, right? So imagine that earthquakes happening in parts of Africa, of which Africa is very poor, is even struggling to build the little infrastructure that they have, and then all of a sudden all those infrastructure is destroyed. Okay, so in the picture here, it shows the locations of the earthquakes. So basically, remember when you talked about the ring of fire? So around the tectonic plates, where the tectonic plates meets, that is also the location where you're going to are more likely to have earthquakes. The reason why those pieces of puzzle, like I said in the other lesson, it's like a pieces of puzzles. So when they move away from each other, or when they move towards each other, that causes earthquakes. So let's look at what causes earthquakes. So what happens when you throw a stone into a pond of water? When the stone hits the water, it can cause a splash and creates circular waves which moves away from the center. The same thing when happens when an earthquake occurs. Right. So earthquakes happen in the part of the world where the crust is weak, there's movement in the earth crust, and shock waves move from that point outwards. These points are called seismic waves, right? So it's shown in that diagram in front of you, showing the seismic movements, right? So the point under the ground where the earthquake starts is called the focus. So basically, where the earthquake starts. So as the earthquake starts, it always starts from a location. that point where it starts from is called the focus, and then the area above the directly above the focus is called the epicenter, right? And we said, I mean, most of the earthquakes happen along the faults that are cracks in the earth's surface, and then after the main earthquake, there are usually several aftershocks or smaller earthquakes. A tremor, which is a slight or a mild earthquake, can usually cause little or no damage. Earthquakes can cause damage to buildings, sinkholes, and rockfalls, and it often kills thousands of people. South Africa is generally an earthquake safe as it is in the middle of African plate. However, earthquakes do occur along fault lines. In 1969, a strong tremor in Tauberg in Western Cape killed 10 people and damaged historic houses. Okay, so now we're going to look at the effects of earthquakes. So what happens if an earthquake takes place? Right. So we need to know these keywords: displacement, that is forced away from where you live; the economy, to do with the country's money and how it is earned and how it is spent. Right. So what are the effects of earthquakes? First of all, there's injury and loss of life. So let's say, I mean, an earthquake takes place when you're inside the house. If it's a strong earthquake, there's bound to be collapse of buildings. So if you're inside the house and then you didn't get a chance to escape, you're more likely to get hurt or even worse to get killed. Right. Afterwards, there's going to be rise in diseases. So we said, I mean, there's destruction of infrastructure, right? So that is the clean supplies of water, your drainage systems are all destroyed, right? Then now there's going to be dirty water flowing around the sewages, right? And then even hospitals sometimes are not going to be able to be there to help you, right? So because of those things, there are going to be diseases around. There's going to be displacement of people because I mean your the areas that people are living in sometimes get destroyed completely, and then people have to move to other areas. Like we said, been talking about damage to infrastructure. That is your roads, your railway lines, your pipelines, your electricity lines, your water supply, your gas supply. All of it is destroyed, right? Sometimes bound to be fires because why? Broken electrical wires and gas and fuel tanks can cause this fire. Tsunamis, right? So if it's a very strong earthquake, sometimes due to the movement in the ocean, it can cause massive movement of water that will rise up high, and then they destroy buildings that are close um, to the oceans. The economy of the country also struggles because why? They have to try and rebuild all the infrastructure and help out all the people that would have been affected by the earthquakes. Medical facilities are put under pressure, right? And rescue services. And usually other countries help a place affected by an earthquake, especially if they don't have the necessary facilities or enough medical supplies or people to help them. Right. Now we're going to look at why some communities are at higher risks than others, like why other people are affected too much by earthquakes, or why other countries are affected by countries more than others, right? So there are two important reasons why earthquakes causes more damage in some communities than others. The amount of damage is usually related to how well the buildings are made. If the buildings are not properly built, or they don't have they were not using the proper material to strengthen the building, then those buildings are more likely to collapse and they will cause more damage. Or if the country doesn't have rescue plans and rescue equipment available to help those people who have been affected by the earthquakes, they are more likely to suffer rather than other countries that have the necessary facilities. Right. So usually it is the poorest people who suffer most from the earthquake damage. Haiti is a less developed country, whereas New Zealand is a more developed country. The earthquake which took place in Haiti and the New Zealand were about the same force, but the earthquake in Haiti did much damage. The reason why it is like that, we said, okay, New Zealand, because they have money, the buildings are made to stand the force of an earthquake. They have enough emergency teams who are trained to deal with the effects of earthquakes. The communication systems are very good. The government provides rescue equipment, food, water, blankets after an earthquake. There are special meeting places or evacuation points in cities where people must go if an earthquake or tsunami happens. Every home is encouraged to have an earthquake kit, which includes drinking water, clothing, dried food, and other emergency food, of which the poor countries have the opposite. The buildings are poorly built. They don't have any, they don't have or even little poor emergency plans, and the people are not well trained for emergencies like tsunamis. The communication systems are very slow. The people tend to send rescue teams very late. People don't know what to do when there's an earthquake. There's few doctors and medicines to treat all the injured people, so that is why a lot of people die in poor countries. Right. So now we're gonna talk about the equipment that is used in measuring earthquakes. We've got what we call um, okay. First of all, we need to look at um, things that we can make our homes quake proof. So we need to use hollow concrete bricks to help to cause minimum damage. So if they fall in an earthquake, roof made from reinforced cement concrete. The foundation has to be made of stones so that it can be strong. We need to use a reinforced steel corner pillars, providing strength and flexibility, because during an earthquake there's bound to be movements. Now we're gonna look at the movements or equipment that is used to measure earthquakes. We have what you call a seismography. So it is a scientific instrument which measures the movement of Earth's surface. The Chinese invented the first seismograph in 132 CE, but today those instruments are computerized, automatic, and electronic. Right. We have what you call a rita scale. So the geologists use the rita scale to measure how strong an earthquake is. Right. So now we're gonna look at the ways to reduce the impact of earthquakes. So if earthquake is to happen, so that people don't get hurt a lot or people don't die a lot. The first thing that we do is to make sure that the buildings are made stronger. So the building structures should be designed in such a way that they can withstand tremors from ground, right? We need to develop an earthquake and tsunami warning systems. So that is a system that warns people in time. We need to have emergency plans that shut down dangerous industries such as power stations and gas supplies. We need to train rescue workers to help survivors in case of an earthquake or tsunamis. All right.